What's up, guys? Derek, moreplaysmoredates.com. Today we're going to be going over a very interesting case report that came to my attention a while back, actually, and I'm just getting to it now. But it's about Nandrolone monotherapy and a female patient who had been abusing Nandrolone for 10 years straight, which seeing the effect it has on them is very, very interesting because this is something I've delved into in the past as a potential alternative form of HRT for those really prone to androgenic and estrogenic side effects as a result of testosterone use and whatnot. And, you know, Nandrolone is pretty much one of the most, if not the most well-tolerated anabolic-androgenic steroid in females. So seeing a case report of exactly how this affects somebody long-term who's a girl, it's honestly really interesting. And getting into it, a lot of people will assert that it's pretty much impossible to lose hair on Nandrolone and, you know, it's not androgenic. And obviously that's not the case. Like, clinically, we've seen viralization occurring in women at dosages as low as, 50 milligrams every other week in long-term application. And in the short term, in studies that are in a more condensed time frame, we see viralization at dosages as low as, 100 milligrams a week or even 50 milligrams a week. But in this study here, this is just, fucking crazy to me. We have a 55-year-old woman who has been using Nandrolone for over 10 years straight. So the background, basically, she is 55, presented with symptoms of Nandrolone decanoate use for the past 10 years. Basically, the background of her story was she had a history of frequent altercations with family members, followed by episodes of dissociative stupor, convulsions, paresthesia, multiple body aches, and weakness. And symptoms would fluctuate over time and were related to psychosocial stressors in life. These symptoms were present since adolescence and led to strained interpersonal relationships. The family consulted locally available doctors, mostly general practitioners or unqualified medical practitioners. During exacerbations of symptoms, treatment would reduce her symptoms temporarily. An unqualified local practitioner prescribed her Nandrolone decanoate injections of 100 milligrams intramuscular when she reported extreme physical weakness and unspecified somatic symptoms during a consultation. So she had improvement in her physical and dissociative symptoms with Nandrolone injections, so they were repeated for years. Gradually, she demanded more, and the injection increased from once a month, so 100 milligrams once a month, to almost once a day over a period of 2 to 3 years. So she literally went from using 100 milligrams a month to almost 700 milligrams a week of Deca. And she reported improvement in her symptoms and weakness. So I guess she would just use more. She reported intense craving, irritability, episodes of anxiety and dissociative stupor on stopping or delaying the injections. She developed long-term adverse effects of anabolic-androgenic steroids like facial hair, male pattern baldness, increased muscularity, and hoarsening of voice and skin rash over a period of 7 to 8 years. So she literally used 700 milligrams almost per week of Deca for 7 to 8 years straight. She stopped attending social gatherings and meeting relatives due to the stigma of these physical changes. Blah, blah, blah. So you can see here, features of irreversible hirsutism after long-term use of anabolic-androgenic steroid. So you can see the hair here and the recession. This is masculinization at its finest here. So Nandrolone, obviously in a dose-dependent manner, is going to induce androgenicity in the body, just like any other androgenic steroid. However, it's just more tissue selective in the way that it kind of transcribes its effects. It's going to 5-alpha reduce into dihydronandrolone. It has less of an impact on, things like acne, hair loss, things like this. But in a dose-dependent manner, just like anything else that has any androgenicity whatsoever, it's still going to induce these effects. It just takes a much higher dosage to do so. And you can see here, she has, tons of facial hair here. She has masculinization. She has male pattern baldness, classic recession on the sides here and thinning on the top. However, this is something that I sort of, rather than just take this at face value as hirsutism, I think this is such a weird case. The fact, though, is if you have any interest in, Nandrolone monotherapy at all, you've probably seen my other videos on it where I detail the shortcomings of studies that look at Nandrolone monotherapy addressing the lack of sufficient aromatization. And there are tons of studies showing that, well, not tons, but there's some studies that show that increasing aromatase expression can actually attenuate the neurotoxicity of Nandrolone. There's also stuff showing how aromatase inhibitors have zero effect on its neurotoxicity, which, otherwise makes a massive difference in regards to testosterone use. There's just, and all of the vascular complications that come as a result of the studies used without adequate estrogen. There's a lot of implications in some of these studies that sufficient, vasodilation and things weren't achieved because of this lack of aromatization, and things that have otherwise could been potentially corrected. I theorize, should an exogenous source of estradiol been administered concurrently with it, and or a base of something else, so that otherwise converts to estrogen or aromatizes sufficiently. So I don't think she would have avoided hirsutism necessarily if she used adequate estrogen source. However, it may have prevented as much hair loss, because you can see here, one of the main things that causes hair loss is the lack of estrogen in the body. It's not just the having aggressive levels of androgens, I should say. It's also a lack of sufficient estrogen, and this is, postmenopausal women classically will see, increased hair shedding, increased, thinning and such that can otherwise be corrected via hormone manipulation. However, in her case, androgenicity is still going to occur in a dose-dependent manner, but I wanted to kind of put out there that it's worth noting that she didn't use estrogen with this. So obviously some of it you can attribute to the nandrolone as far as the, hirsutism side effects and whatnot, but some of the hair loss, it's kind of up for debate whether, if there was a sufficient amount of estrogen there, if it would have occurred as badly as it did, should that have been in there. And honestly, the fact that she still has hair on her head after using 700 milligrams of this compound after 7 to 8 years straight, and she's 55 and still hasn't suffered from a heart attack or anything, is kind of crazy to me, and worth, I wish they would do a follow-up with this. I don't know, let's see, the case report came out in 2014. I hope they do a follow-up with this, because this was one of the most interesting case reports I've seen on nandrolone, since I've started delving into its research. And obviously this is, a very odd application of it, and it just didn't even really make sense to prescribe it in this position, but it certainly gives us some insight into what kind of effect it has long term at, super physiologic dosages. Not that there's a physiologic dosage, but you know what I mean, the androgen load exceeding what one would otherwise produce endogenously naturally. So, in women, this is like the most obvious metric of how androgenic something is assessing how it affects them, because their baseline hormone profile is so estrogen dominant and androgen deficient. Not necessarily deficient, but they just don't have very many androgens to begin with. So anyways, obviously it does in a dose-dependent manner still induce hirsutism as expected, perhaps not nearly to the extent of other anabolic-androgenic steroids, and perhaps the neurotoxic and cardiotoxic effects could be attenuated significantly with proper aromatization and or exogenous estradiol and or other means of achieving adequate estrogen receptor activation. And this is just a sort of, me looking at something I found interesting that I thought I'd relay back to you guys, as I know you guys like following my research, and I didn't really want to just skip over this because it was on my to-do list. And I know this is a really, science-intensive video, but, I know some of you guys like following my continued research on some of these compounds, and, in my ever and never-ending pursuit for the most tissue-selective compounds ever, and my continuous research into their tolerability and safety profiles long term. So anyways, hopefully you enjoyed that. Take from that what you will. Thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplatesmoredates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplates_moredates, Facebook, Snapchat, Twitter, BitChute, TikTok, etc. Apple Podcasts. Click on the newsletter link in the video description below if you want to sign up and get notified every time I post an article. They are far more concise and professionally laid out than my videos, where I sort of just go on tangents and, talk about more or less, I wing it, but they're a bit more professionally laid out than the videos with, table of content, concise subsections, references with the actual clinical studies I reference. So then you can go look into them yourself and kind of, do your own research on the stuff that I talk about in my videos, rather than, just hearing me talk about it. You can actually go delve into it further yourself as well for your own individual research, interests. So anyways, thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.